Welcome to another edition of Dan Frequently Asked Questions. In these editions, we address questions that divers have, usually about fairly simple things, and fortunately, in many cases, we can provide answers. But this is no substitute to a visit to a diving physician or a relevant specialist. In this edition, though, we will be discussing the issue of sinus squeeze and what you might be able to do about it. Keep watching. We got the following question. It's a rather lengthy one from a diver, but it does paint a certain picture and allows us to address a number of issues that will be of interest to divers that don't necessarily have this particular problem, but may have other ones that have the same or similar causes. The diver says that they need advice about diving. They're about 30 years old and they've always had sinus problems. They do free diving and have done more so in the past 2 years, and they sometimes struggle to equalize, but it's erratic. Now and then they can do one dive to 24 meters, but then the next dive is only to 6 meters. Equalizing the ears is generally not a problem, but then they get a problem with pain in the forehead, and equalizing then becomes a problem related to the sinuses. Not only that, but they then can sometimes get a reverse block on the way back to the surface. So is there something that we can offer as advice? Well, there are a couple of things that I'd like to point out just in general, and that is the process of diving. In other words, just the process of pressure change inflicts a certain differential pressure on our middle ear, sinus, and nasal passages, no matter how well we equalize. Clearly, if we have a low volume compliant mask, that diminishes the problem, and if we can keep up with equalizing, that also diminishes the tendency of the mucous membranes to swell or secrete fluid or even blood to make up the volume space. And then certain positions sometimes make it easier and less likely for us to develop problems. So if I had to give a sort of a catch-all answer to this particular question, it would be as follows. The reason why the first dive goes so easily is because during that dive, the mucous membranes are all perfectly normal. However, the chances are, especially with breath hold diving, that one would tend to conserve equalizing the ears and in the process run the risk of or greater tendency of middle ear barotrauma and in fact swelling of the mucosa in the nasal passages. Now the nasal passage, and particularly the one that leads to the frontal sinus, is the longest and also runs a rather sort of tortuous route. So it's not a straight, simple in and out opening, but rather a canal. So my suggestion would be, first of all, to see if you are able to equalize slightly more regularly. And I know that one has precious little amount of air in the lungs, and you don't want to spend it on your sinuses and ears, but if you don't equalize regularly, you pay for it, as indeed you have just illustrated. The second thing that you might consider is to actually wear either pro-ear plugs or wear a pro-ear mask. Now I know, once again, there's an additional amount of equalization that needs to occur, but what this does, particularly if it's the pro-ear plugs, is it somehow prevents or protects the ears against the extreme excursions of pressure that we undergo, particularly with breath hold diving. And lastly, what I would recommend is that in between dives, you might consider using Sinus Rinse, and there's also a way in which you can apply topical nose drops that would open the passage to the frontal sinus and minimize the chances of you getting problems in that particular area. This is quite an elaborate topic, and I've only addressed it very cursorily, and I refer you to some of the videos that we've already previously developed on diving and ear related problems. So until next time, safe diving!